You're nothing, Jasmine. Those three words, dripping with arrogance, echoed inside America's most watched hearing. Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, sat defiant, while across from him, Jasmine Crockett rose like a blade of justice. For decades, power has silenced truth. Over 400 documented cases of racial violence remain unsolved. More than 60% of Americans over 50 say they've witnessed injustice with their own eyes. And yet here, in this chamber, one voice dares to strike back. This is not politics. This is war. A war of words, of power, of survival. Tonight, the clash between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump will ignite like thunder, and the question is simple. When arrogance collides with justice, who breaks first? The chamber was already charged before a single word was spoken. Cameras clicked like a chorus of insects, recording every twitch, every blink. Reporters sat perched, their pens trembling, their lenses hungry for blood. Then the doors opened. Donald Trump entered with the swagger of a man who believed walls bent for him. His suit, a shade too loud, caught the lights. His smirk, stretched wide, was the weapon he carried into every battlefield. He didn't glance left or right. He didn't need to. He owned the room. At least that's what he thought. His shoes struck the marble floor like war drums. Each step deliberate, each pause theatrical. The crowd shifted, whispers rising, some in admiration, others in disgust. To his followers, he was the titan. To his enemies, the villain unmasked. And then, silence. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett rose slowly. No theatrics, no false smile. Only steel in her eyes and ice in her voice. "Mr. Trump," she began, her tone slicing through the silence like a blade, "you are not here to put on another circus. Today the truth will rip the mask off your face." Gasps rippled across the chamber. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even an accusation. It was a sentence. Trump's head jerked back, then forward, his grin widening as if savoring the challenge. He leaned forward on the desk, eyes gleaming with that familiar fire of mockery. "You?" His voice rose, mocking and venomous. "You're nothing but a puppet. I'm the one who holds real power here." The words slammed against the chamber walls. His supporters chuckled darkly. His critics stiffened. And Jasmine? She didn't flinch. Her stare burned, unblinking, as if she were staring straight through him into the rot behind the man. The first volley had been fired, and it was merciless. The atmosphere thickened, pulling every spectator into the vortex. Every breath felt heavier, like the room itself understood it was about to witness a storm that would not leave survivors untouched. Jasmine leaned forward now, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "Power built on lies is nothing more than sand in the tide. And tides, Mr. Trump, they always rise." The smirk faltered, if only for a fraction of a second. Enough for the cameras to catch. Enough for the audience to murmur. Trump's jaw tightened. "Lies? Don't lecture me about lies, Crockett. You don't have the courage to stand where I stand. You don't have the people. You don't have the strength." The chamber erupted, voices clashing, echoes colliding, the heat of division rising like wildfire. The chairman's gavel struck wood again and again, but no one was listening anymore. The duel had begun. Jasmine's voice cut through the chaos, calm, unyielding. "Strength? Real strength doesn't come from bullying, from corruption, from bending truth until it breaks. Real strength is standing in the fire and not flinching." Trump leaned back, scoffing loudly. "Spare me the sermon. This is politics, Jasmine. And in politics, I win. Always. Not today." The words struck like lightning. Her tone was quiet, but it carried with the force of 1,000 storms. And suddenly the air shifted. Viewers watching from across America felt it through their screens. Something more than politics was about to unfold. The chamber held its breath. Trump opened his mouth to fire back, but Jasmine moved first. She slammed her hand against the wooden table, the crack echoing like thunder through the room. Papers jumped, pens rattled, and hearts skipped. Every pair of eyes snapped to her. Her voice rose, not shouting but resonant, commanding, undeniable. "This is not your stage. This is not your circus. This is the reckoning you cannot escape." The room froze. Even Trump's smirk faltered for more than a flicker this time. For the first time that night, silence didn't belong to arrogance. It belonged to justice. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories of power, justice, and the voices that refuse to be silenced, make sure you subscribe to Harrison Stories. Because tonight is only the beginning. The silence after Jasmine's table slam was electric, almost sacred. Every camera zoomed in. Every reporter leaned forward. Every spectator braced. And then she moved. Jasmine reached for a thick folder resting at the edge of her desk. She didn't rush. She didn't tremble. Her hands were steady, deliberate, like an executioner preparing the blade. She lifted it high enough for everyone to see. The room hushed as the weight of the moment pressed down. This, she declared, her voice cutting sharp, is not rhetoric. It is not rumor. It is record. She flipped the folder open and slid out a stack of documents, crisp pages glinting under the fluorescent lights. Financial records, transactions, numbers twisted into shadows. She placed the first page flat on the desk before her, then tapped it once with her index finger. The sound, soft, controlled, was louder than any gavel. These are your financial disclosures, Mr. Trump, and within them lie patterns so dark, so deliberate, they reek of corruption. A wave of gas rippled through the chamber. Trump leaned forward, his grin snapping back like a shield. Fake, fabricated, another witch hunt. I've seen this movie before, Jasmine, and I always walk out the winner. His voice thundered, his finger jabbing the air like a spear. Those numbers mean nothing. Just ink on paper, lies dressed up as evidence. I built an empire. You built a fraud. Jasmine cut him off, her voice a whip crack across his chest. The room jolted. The chairman tried to interject, but his voice drowned in the tempest rising between them. Trump barked, louder, angrier. You don't get to call me a fraud. I made this country rich again, powerful again. You're sitting in that chair because of me. And you're sitting in that chair because of greed, deceit, and the arrogance that believes no one would ever catch you. Her words landed like blows, each syllable sharp, deliberate. The chamber rattled with murmurs. Trump's fists clenched, knuckles whitening. You don't know what you're talking about. Those papers, those are legal documents, reviewed, approved, signed off by the best. Jasmine leaned closer, sliding another sheet across the desk toward him, her eyes never leaving his. And yet, page 47 shows a transfer, $3 million funneled through a shell company in the Caymans. Page 63, a loan that never existed, yet padded your assets by tens of millions. And page 89, she lifted the paper higher, her voice rising, trembling not with fear but with fury. Page 89 ties it all directly back to you. The audience erupted. Trump shot to his feet, jabbing his finger at her across the room. Lies, all lies! You and your team cooked this up. You think you can smear me with paper and ink? Pathetic? Sit down, Mr. Trump. Jasmine's command cracked the air like thunder. And for a heartbeat, unbelievably, he did. But only to rise again, venom dripping from his tongue. You want to play prosecutor? Fine. But you forget, half this country still believes in me. They don't care about your doctored papers. They don't care about your little circus. His words carried the arrogance of a man convinced he was untouchable. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice low, dangerous, a blade against his throat. They will care when the truth is too loud to ignore. They will care when the lies collapse under their own weight. And tonight, Mr. Trump, the collapse begins. The chamber roared. People shouted, chairs scraped, reporters scribbled furiously. The tension was no longer air. It was fire, spreading, consuming. Every word between them was no longer debate. It was combat. Every sentence a strike. Every rebuttal a counterpunch. Trump snarled, his voice cracking with fury. You don't scare me, Crockett. You're nothing. Just another name that history will forget. But Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She stood taller, her voice carrying over the storm like a battle horn. History doesn't forget the truth. It doesn't forget the reckoning. And tonight, it will not forget you. Her hand slammed another document onto the desk. The papers scattered like shrapnel, fluttering through the air as if the evidence itself demanded to be seen. The sound echoed. The chamber froze. And then, chaos. Shouts overlapped. Voices collided. The chamber a furnace of fury and disbelief. Each word from Jasmine struck like a slap. Each denial from Trump, a desperate shield cracking under pressure. The duel had shifted. It was no longer arrogance versus composure. It was evidence versus denial, truth versus deflection. And the room knew this was only the first blow. Trump straightened his tie, forcing his jaw into that trademark smirk. The smirk of a man who had learned long ago that when cornered, the best defense was to wound the opponent deeper than they could ever wound him. "You think you're clever, Jasmine," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "But the truth is, you're small, insignificant, a puppet propped up by people who will forget your name the second you stop entertaining them." His words slithered across the chamber, oozing with venom. "You stand there pretending to be righteous," he continued, his finger stabbing the air like a dagger. "But we both know. You crave attention. You need the spotlight. Without me, you'd still be nobody. Just another angry voice lost in the crowd." Gasps erupted. Cameras zoomed tighter. The networks outside pulsed the exchange across the nation, feeding millions the sight of a president clawing not at evidence, but at dignity. Jasmine did not recoil. Instead, she tilted her head, her lips curling into the faintest trace of a smile, the kind of smile that carried daggers behind it. "Mr. President," she said, her voice smooth as glass but sharp enough to bleed, "you don't need to perform. The lies are already in your blood." The chamber froze. The words hung, heavy, merciless. Trump's smirk faltered. His nostrils flared. His hands balled into fists on the desk before him. "You dare," he growled. "I dare because truth doesn't tremble before power." Jasmine snapped, her eyes locking onto his with the precision of a predator. "And today, your arrogance isn't protecting you. It's exposing you." The tension thickened, every spectator leaning forward as if drawn by invisible force. Trump slammed his hand on the table, the wood groaning under his fury. "You're pathetic, a grandstander. Everything you say, scripted. Everything you do, staged. You're not justice, you're theater." The insult was loud, but Jasmine's laugh was louder. It wasn't the laughter of amusement. It was the laughter of someone who had already seen through the mask, who knew the wound she inflicted was deeper than any shout could cover. "If this is theater," she replied, leaning in with eyes that gleamed like steel, "then you, Mr. President, are its perfect villain. No script could ever match the tragedy of your truth." The press gallery erupted. Fingers clattered on keyboards. Cameras clicked in manic rhythm. Outside, networks splashed headlines in red banners. "Crockett to Trump. Lies in your blood. Theater or truth. Chaos in the hearing room." Millions watching at home froze mid-breath, their televisions hissing with tension. Trump tried to drown it out. His voice rose, louder, harsher, desperate. "You don't get to talk to me like that. I've held more power in one finger than you will in your entire life. I built towers, nations listened when I spoke." "And yet here you are," Jasmine cut in, her tone surgical, "reduced to shouting at a folder of your own lies. Power doesn't shout, Mr. Trump. Power doesn't need to." His face reddened, the veins at his temples bulging. The chamber shook with noise. Gasps, murmurs, the crackle of fury vibrating through every wall. The confrontation was no longer political, it was primal. Two forces locked in a duel neither could retreat from. Trump lunged again with words meant to tear. "You're weak. You're a joke. History will laugh at you." But Jasmine's reply was merciless. "History doesn't laugh at justice. It laughs at men who believe they could bury it." A silence thundered across the room. Trump's mouth opened, then closed. His chest heaved. He looked for the first time not untouchable, but cornered. The press cameras caught it. The world saw it. And outside, the reaction detonated. Commentators scrambled. Social feeds flooded. The nation wasn't just watching a hearing. It was watching a public unmasking. A president humiliated. A warrior of truth refusing to bow. The energy inside the chamber boiled until it seemed no walls could contain it. This wasn't argument anymore. This was survival. There was no middle ground. No diplomacy, only advance, or be crushed, and both knew it. The chamber erupted again, but this time, there was no rhythm, no pause between blows. It was a firefight, words flying like bullets, each syllable tearing into the walls of dignity and power. Trump's voice thundered first, raw with rage. You think you've got me cornered? You don't know the half of it. You dig through my records, parade your so-called evidence. But let me tell you something, Jasmine. This country needs me. Without me, it crumbles. His fist slammed the desk, shaking the microphone. You sit there pretending to be righteous, but you'll never build a tower, never sign a deal, never stand in a room where leaders bow their heads to you. You're nothing but noise. Gasps rippled across the rows. The chamber was no longer just a hearing room. It was a battlefield. Jasmine stood slowly, her presence slicing through the chaos. Noise? She repeated, her voice a dangerous calm. No, Mr. Trump, this is not noise. This is the sound of your empire cracking. She held up another sheet, emails this time, laced with the rot of scandal. These are communications between your companies and foreign entities during your presidency. Payments, promises, secrets you swore never existed. The audience leaned forward as though the walls themselves strained to hear. Trump barked over her words, his face red, his spit catching the light. Lies, fabrications, every one of them. You're playing games with the American people. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She flipped to another page, her words slamming into the chamber like live rounds. Page 12, direct correspondence with Russian intermediaries. Page 34, offshore accounts linked to your children. Page 57, contracts signed under shadow companies that led back to your desk. The air turned molten. You call this fake? Tell the American people why their trust was sold piece by piece to the highest bidder. Tell them, Mr. Trump. Trump's roar shook the ceiling. Shut up! You don't get to tell me how to answer. The sheer volume made some in the gallery flinch, but Jasmine did not blink. Volume doesn't equal truth, she shot back. It equals fear, and right now you're drowning in it. The words struck harder than any document. Trump lashed out again, desperation seeping through his bravado. You're a disgrace, a fraud yourself. You want to lecture me? Look at your own record, Jasmine. You've accomplished nothing. Nothing, he shouted it so loudly the microphone screeched. Jasmine let the echo settle before answering. Her tone dropped, slicing like a knife through cloth. I've accomplished one thing you never could, Mr. Trump. I stand here unbought, unbroken, and unafraid of the truth. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even the whispers stopped, suspended in the tension. Trump, cornered, swung harder. His insults grew harsher, more personal, clawing at her character, her past, her identity. But Jasmine parried every strike with precision, her comeback slicing him down to size. Mr. Trump, every insult you spit says more about your weakness than my worth. Mr. Trump, your empire wasn't built on strength. It was built on sand, and it's collapsing beneath your feet. Mr. Trump, history won't remember your towers. It will remember the rubble you left behind. Each line landed like a bullet of its own, and the audience reacted. Gasps, gasps, then thunderous murmurs. The hearing was no longer proceedings. It was a dual broadcast to the nation, each second branding itself into memory. One reporter whispered under his breath, caught on a hot mic, "This isn't a hearing, this is execution." And still Trump screamed, his face crimson, his words incoherent at times, his voice cracking under the strain. But Jasmine stood, unwavering, her every retort sharpening the blade she held at his ego's throat. The climax came like lightning. Trump leaned forward, veins bulging, and roared, "I am the truth! I am the power here!" Jasmine's eyes blazed, her voice rising above him like a final verdict. "You can scream all you want, Mr. Trump, but you cannot scream louder than the truth." The words detonated. The chamber fell silent, the echoes reverberating like the aftershock of a bomb. Outside, headlines exploded. Screens lit up. Viewers sat frozen, breathless, realizing they had just witnessed history being carved in fire. And Jasmine stood tall, unshaken, the embodiment of defiance. Make sure you subscribe to Harrison Stories. Because battles like these are only getting louder. The words about subscribing faded into the air like smoke, but inside the chamber, the fire still burned. Trump leaned back, chest heaving, sweat pooling at his brow. For the first time, the mask of untouchable arrogance cracked. His next words slipped faster than his tongue could control. Those transfers, they weren't me. They were handled by people. I didn't sign every page. Nobody signs every page. The moment hung, dangerous. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. The sound in the chamber shifted. Whispers rising, pens scratching. Reporters smelled blood. She struck instantly. "So you admit," she said, voice razor sharp, "that money flowed through your companies without your knowledge? That millions moved offshore under your name? And you simply looked away?" Trump froze. His jaw twitched. "That's not what I said," he snapped, fumbling for control. "Don't twist my words." But Jasmine's eyes glimmered, unrelenting. "Then explain. Who signed those transfers? Who created those shell companies? Who wired money that ended up padding your balance sheets?" Her questions fired like bullets, one after another, never giving him space to breathe. Trump's voice cracked, the edges fraying. I don't have to answer your crooked little setups. This is all theater." "Then answer plainly," Jasmine pressed, leaning closer across the desk, her voice like a dagger slipping under armor. "Did you profit from foreign funds while sitting in the Oval Office?" The silence in the chamber thickened. Cameras zoomed. Reporters leaned forward so hard their seats creaked. Trump's mouth opened, then closed. His throat tightened around words he couldn't shape. Jasmine pounced. "Answer the question, Mr. Trump. Yes or no?" "I don't need to." "Yes or no." "I won't play your game." "Yes or no." Each repetition was a hammer blow. Each pause a public humiliation. Trump's voice rose, shrill, almost a rasp. "You don't get to interrogate me. I'm the president." His hand swept across the desk, scattering documents like leaves in a storm. Papers flew into the air, drifting down over the chamber, evidence fluttering like accusations too heavy for him to hold. Gasps filled the room. Jasmine didn't flinch. She stood tall, her voice cold, steady, unshaken by his fury. "Then why do you sound like a man with something to hide?" Trump's face reddened. His shoulders trembled. For the first time, the aura of control slipped, replaced by the unmistakable tremor of fear. Reporters scribbled furiously. Headlines were already forming. "Trump stumbles under fire." "Crockett forces president into silence." The nation outside roared with reaction. Screens flickered in diners, living rooms, and bars. Everywhere the same question whispered on lips, carried through social feeds and radio waves. "Who's winning?" Inside, the battle raged on. Jasmine leaned in again, her voice low but piercing, like steel sliding across stone. "Mr. Trump, every deflection makes your silence louder. Every shout makes your guilt clearer. You can scatter papers, but you cannot scatter the truth." The room pulsed with the weight of her words. Trump's reply came broken, jagged, more desperation than dominance. This is unfair, rigged. You're all against me. It's a witch hunt, a disgrace, the biggest disgrace in American history." But the thunder of his voice no longer carried authority. It carried panic. Jasmine's eyes never wavered. Her questions stabbed deeper, relentless. "How many shell companies existed under your name? Who approved the transfers to foreign accounts? Why did your financial disclosures omit millions in assets?" Each one pierced, and each time, Trump's answers slipped further into stammers, denials, contradictions. He shifted in his seat. He tugged at his tie. His eyes darted to the cameras, as though searching for a lifeline. But there was none. The chamber wasn't just listening, it was judging. The public wasn't just watching, it was deciding. And with every tremble, every misplaced word, Donald Trump, the man who once wrapped himself in power like armor, looked less like a conqueror and more like prey. Jasmine delivered the final strike of the round, her voice carrying through the silence like a sentence passed. "You can yell, you can deny, you can pound this desk until it splinters, but the truth is patient, and it's louder than you'll ever be." The room fell into stunned stillness, heavy and breathless. And across America, the question turned sharper, louder, impossible to escape. Who is winning? The question still hung in the air when Trump snapped upright, his eyes narrowing into slits of cold fury. Then, with a theatrical sweep of his arm, he produced a thick folder from beneath the table, hidden until this very moment. The sound of the clasp snapping open echoed like a gunshot. "Since you're so eager for the truth, Jasmine," he sneered, his lips curling, "let's show America your truth." Gasps rippled across the chamber. He held up a stack of documents, waving them like a torch in a storm. "These," Trump barked, slamming the papers down with a thud, "are records that prove Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has ties she doesn't want the public to see. Financial backers, questionable donors, connections dripping with conflict of interest." The chamber erupted. Reporters lunged forward. Cameras flashed. Jasmine didn't flinch. She folded her arms, calm but coiled, like a blade waiting for the perfect strike. "Mr. Trump," she said coolly, "if you had evidence worth anything, you wouldn't need to hide it in the shadows until now." Trump's face darkened. He slammed a finger against the page. "Read it. Read it out loud. You've been playing the saint while lining your pockets with dirty money." The audience buzzed, whispers overlapping in waves. The tension swelled, threatening to swallow the room whole. Jasmine rose slowly from her chair. Her voice, steady and sharp, cut through the noise. "You accuse me of shadow," she said, eyes locked on him. "Yet everything I do is on record, transparent, open for the people to see. Meanwhile, you hide bankruptcy after bankruptcy, lawsuit after lawsuit, lie after lie. Tell me, Mr. Trump, what exactly are you trying to distract us from tonight?" The chamber snapped. It was no longer a hearing, it was a street fight. Trump slammed both fists onto the table, his voice breaking into a roar. "You are a fraud. You are a disgrace. You don't belong in this room. You don't belong in this country's leadership." "Enough!" the chair of the committee thundered, gavel pounding like thunder. "Both of you, keep this within order." But order was already gone. Jasmine shot back, her words like arrows dipped in venom. "A fraud? I haven't been impeached. I haven't been indicted. I haven't left a trail of wreckage for others to clean up after me. You have, over and over." Trump leaned across the table, his voice a rasp of venom. "You're nothing but a loudmouth. No one even knew your name until you started attacking me." Jasmine didn't blink. Instead, she leaned forward too, their faces nearly clashing, the air between them crackling like live wire. "Then remember my name tonight," she whispered, deadly calm, "because it's the one that's making you sweat." The chamber gasped, as if the very oxygen had been pulled out of the room. Trump recoiled, then charged again, words spilling in a torrent of fury. "You think you're clever? You think you're some kind of hero? You're trash. You're a liar. You're—" "Order!" The gavel hammered again, but the words were drowned by the clamor. Reporters scribbled frantically. Staffers exchanged horrified looks. Even seasoned politicians shifted in their seats, unsettled by the raw violence of words. It felt as though the walls themselves trembled under the weight of their clash. Jasmine raised her hand, slicing through Trump's rage with a single motion. Her voice dropped to a lethal whisper, yet every ear caught it. "Mr. Trump," she said, slow and deliberate, "you only throw mud because you're terrified of the light." The room froze. Her words hovered in the air, heavy, unshakable, inescapable. Trump's face twisted, searching for a counterstrike, but nothing came. The silence after her challenge was deafening. Not even the gavel dared break it. And in that silence, everyone knew the war had shifted again. Then Jasmine moved. She reached into her folder, not hurried, not theatrical, but deliberate, unflinching. Every eye followed her hand as though it held the trigger to a loaded weapon. When she placed the packet of papers on the table, the sound was soft, but the silence made it echo like thunder. "These," Jasmine declared, her voice steady but blazing, "are financial records authenticated by independent auditors, cross-checked, sealed, and verified. There is no spin, no manipulation, no conspiracy." She held one sheet high, facing the cameras. Rows of numbers glared back. Dates, transfers, shell corporations, all threading together into one undeniable trail. This, she said, her voice cutting through the heavy air, is the proof of years of deceit, money hidden, taxes evaded, channels created to bury the truth from the American people. The chamber exploded. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping. Reporters bolted upright as if jolted by electricity. Trump froze. For a heartbeat, just one, his face went blank, as though the mask had slipped. Then the fury roared back. "Fake!" he bellowed, slamming his hand onto the table so hard the microphone squealed. "This is a witch hunt! The biggest witch hunt in history!" His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through the rage. "Every president has enemies. Every leader has haters. You," he jabbed a finger at Jasmine, his face red. "You are nothing but a hater in a cheap suit." The words rattled across the room, ugly and raw. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she rose to her feet, her presence towering, her shadow falling over the table. When she spoke, it wasn't a retort. It was a battle cry. "This is not a witch hunt," she thundered, her voice shaking the chamber walls. "This is justice." The word cracked like lightning. Every camera lens quivered, every microphone strained, every soul in the room felt it like a strike to the chest. Her voice drowned his, eclipsed his, consumed the space with sheer truth. Trump staggered, still shouting, but his words faltered against the force of hers. His roars became echoes, hollow against the clarity of her declaration. The chair tried to gavel order back into the room, but the chamber had transformed into a coliseum. It was no longer procedure, it was survival. The public gallery leaned forward, eyes wide, hands gripping the rails. Viewers across America sat frozen, screens glowing in darkened rooms. Breaths caught in their throats. One woman in the front row whispered, almost to herself, "That's the sound of someone telling the truth." Trump snarled, sweat glistening under the lights. "You think you've won? You think you can shout louder and erase me? They love me. Millions love me. You will never—" "Millions followed lies." Jasmine cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade unsheathed. "Millions were deceived, but tonight, Mr. Trump, millions are watching the truth slice through the fog." Her hands slammed onto the financial report, the papers rattling like the clang of steel. "This is the sword of justice, and it cuts both ways." The chamber shook with the resonance of her words. Trump opened his mouth, but nothing came. His eyes darted, searching for escape, for distraction, for anything to turn the tide. But there was no place left to run. The truth glared back from the documents like a mirror he could not shatter. Jasmine stood unyielding, her gaze fierce, her voice echoing not just in the chamber, but through every broadcast, every living room, every diner, every late-night TV screen in America. "This is justice," she repeated, softer now, but carrying more weight than any scream. And justice does not wait. The room, the nation, the world, every listener felt the air shift, because in that moment, the sword was out, and it would not be sheathed again. Trump's face turned scarlet, sweat glistening under the harsh lights. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the arms of his chair, fingers trembling with rage. "You will not destroy me," he roared, his voice breaking into a guttural howl. "I built this country back from nothing. I carried it on my shoulders. And you," he spat the word like venom, "you're nothing but a loudmouth parasite." His voice shook the walls, but Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned forward, her glare sharp enough to slice steel. "Mr. Trump," she fired back, her words crackling like thunder. "You carried nothing but your ego. You built nothing but walls of lies. And tonight, those walls are crumbling." The chamber gasped. The air grew thick, every breath heavy, every heartbeat echoing like a drum. Trump lurched halfway out of his chair, fists slamming onto the desk. "You think you can judge me? You think you can humiliate me in front of the world? I am the President of the United States." "Not for long," Jasmine shot back instantly, her voice cutting through his roar. "Your power is borrowed. Your throne is cracked. And justice," she pounded her fist onto the table, "is coming for you." The clash of their voices was like storm and lightning colliding, each strike louder than the last. Every word left scars in the air, too sharp, too raw to be forgotten. Trump's words tumbled faster, less controlled, fueled by fury more than reason. You're corrupt. You're dangerous. You're you're a disgrace to this chamber. But Jasmine met every insult with precision, like a warrior countering each blow. I am dangerous to liars. I am a disgrace to tyrants. And I am a threat to every mask you've ever worn. Her words landed like strikes of lightning, each one shaking the chamber to its foundation. Trump's face contorted. He jabbed a trembling finger at her. You won't get away with this. You can't. They'll never believe you. They'll never take your side. Jasmine straightened, her shoulders unyielding, her eyes burning like fire. They don't have to believe me. They only need to believe the truth. And the truth doesn't need permission to exist. A wave of murmurs rolled through the chamber. Even the committee chair leaned back, momentarily silenced by the sheer force of her defiance. Trump slammed his hand again, the sound sharp as a gunshot. You're finished. Do you hear me? Finished. But Jasmine's reply came like a hammer, louder than his fury, stronger than his threats. You will not escape this time, she roared, her voice slicing through the storm. Not this time. Not with lies. Not with shouting. Not with fear. The chamber quivered. The storm had broken fully now, two voices crashing, colliding, no restraint left, no civility left. It was not a hearing anymore. It was a battlefield. The audience sat paralyzed, jaws clenched, eyes wide. Some leaned forward as though witnessing history itself unfold in raw, brutal strokes. Others sat back pale, as if fearing the ceiling might cave under the pressure. Trump shouted until his throat rasped, words spilling like fire and acid. Jasmine hurled her retorts like bolts of lightning, each one striking deeper, sharper, unavoidable. The room was drenched in their fury. The air itself seemed to shake, every atom trembling with the violence of words. And then, silence. It wasn't peace. It was the silence of a storm hovering at its peak, suspended between destruction and collapse. Jasmine leaned in, voice low but scorching, carrying across the stunned chamber. You can scream as loud as you want, but you cannot scream louder than justice. Her words hung there, heavy, final, unmovable. No one dared to breathe. The storm still raged, but its center was hers. And then Trump struck. He straightened his back, chest heaving, sweat rolling down his temple. From beneath his pile of papers, he yanked a folder bound in crimson leather, prepared, rehearsed, his so-called trump card. I've had enough of this circus, he thundered, voice echoing with a sudden clarity. This, he slapped the folder, is my defense. This is proof that all of your accusations are lies, that everything you've thrown at me is nothing but political theater. The chamber stirred, uneasy, as he pulled out sheets of statements, affidavits, and cherry-picked documents. One by one, he waved them in the air, feeding them to the cameras like a ringmaster tossing meat to a crowd. You see this? Testimony. Sworn. You see this? Numbers that they don't want you to see. And this, he lifted another page, trembling with fury. This is the truth that will save me. From the back rows, voices erupted. A cluster of his allies, red-faced and loyal, began to chant. Witch hunt! Witch hunt! Witch hunt! The chant grew louder, swelling, bouncing off the walls like a battle hymn. Soon the gallery shook with noise, half in outrage, half in defiance. Trump raised his arms like a general rallying his army. They know I'm right. They know this is all fake. You cannot silence millions of voices. The chair slammed the gavel, wood cracking against wood, again and again. Order! This chamber will maintain order! But order was gone. The walls quivered with the roar of voices, a mob in miniature, whipped into frenzy by his defiance. And in the middle of the storm, Jasmine did the unthinkable. She went silent. She leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and watched. No retort, no rebuttal, no interruption. The cameras turned to her, hungry for reaction. Viewers at home leaned forward, confused, desperate. Was she retreating? Was she cornered? Trump smirked, seizing the moment. What's wrong, Congresswoman? Cat got your tongue? Finally realized you can't touch me? Finally realized that you're just noise, and I'm history? His supporters jeered, their shouts filling the chamber like fire in dry grass. But Jasmine did not move. Her stillness was its own kind of violence. The silence stretched. 30 seconds. 40. A full minute. Every second the tension tightened like a rope drawn across a battlefield. The nation watching could feel it in their chests, a suffocating weight pressing down. Trump leaned closer, his grin wide, his tone dripping with mockery. You're finished. Admit it. You have nothing left. Nothing. Still, Jasmine sat unmoved. Her hands rested calmly on the table, her eyes locked on the papers he waved like weapons. The chamber began to shift. The chanting faltered. Whispers spread. Something was happening, something no one could name yet. And then slowly, Jasmine lifted her chin. Her gaze rose, steady and fierce, catching the light until her eyes burned with defiance. It wasn't rage, it wasn't desperation. It was resolve, cold, sharp, unbreakable. Trump's smirk flickered, just slightly. For the first time, the certainty in his face cracked. Jasmine leaned forward, her silence louder than any scream. The storm had been his for a moment, but now with a single glance she was taking it back. The nation watching knew it. This was not retreat. This was the calm before the blade descended. And as her eyes locked on him, glowing like embers in the dark, everyone felt it. The killing strike was coming. Jasmine stood. The scrape of her chair against the marble floor was soft, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. The chamber froze. Even the chants, the restless murmurs, the thunder of shuffling feet, everything collapsed into silence. She reached for her folder, not crimson like his, not flashy. A simple black binder, worn at the edges, heavy with truth. When she opened it, the microphones picked up the crackle of paper. The sound rolled across the room, electric, alive. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice steady, sharp, and deliberate. I've listened, I've watched, and I've waited, because I wanted this moment. She held up a single document, her hand unwavering. To matter. The camera zoomed in. The nation leaned closer. This, Jasmine declared, shaking the page just once, is the statement that blows apart every word he has spoken tonight. Signed, dated, witnessed, verified. She began to read. Each syllable was a nail hammered into the coffin. Names, numbers, locations, exact dates. A paper trail of money moving through shadowy accounts. Testimonies that contradicted his denials with brutal clarity. Details too precise, too damning, too airtight to dismiss. The chamber erupted, not in chaos this time, but in gasps. Some clutched their seats, others covered their mouths. Trump staggered. The confidence that had carried his voice moments ago faltered. His jaw tightened. His lips trembled. That's not real, he snapped, but the words cracked as they left him. That's a forgery, another lie, another trap. His allies echoed him at first, half-hearted jeers thrown into the air. Fake, fake, don't believe her. But their voices were thinner now, hesitant, unsure. The chant did not spread. Jasmine turned another page. This one contained a signature. His signature. The camera zoomed in again, magnifying the ink that was unmistakably his. Trump's eyes darted. He reached for his own folder, flipping pages in desperation, searching for anything, any shield against the blade now buried deep. But the papers shook in his hands. For the first time, Donald Trump's voice wavered. This is being taken out of context, he stammered, his tone sliding from fury to fear. You don't understand. You don't understand how these things work. Jasmine did not flinch. Her words cut clean, merciless. Oh, we understand perfectly. The people understand. And tonight they will see you not as a victim, but as what you truly are. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the gavel did not fall. The chair, the aides, the guards, they all waited, held in the gravity of her strike. One by one, the faces of Trump's supporters changed. The red fire of loyalty drained into pale unease. The chanting stopped altogether, replaced by shifting feet and stolen glances. The air thickened with betrayal, the kind that spreads when the lie has gone too far, when faith finally shatters. Trump tried once more. He slammed his palm against the desk, the sound echoing hollow. This is political theater, a witch hunt. None of this will stand in court. But even as he shouted, his voice broke. It cracked under the weight of her evidence, splintering in front of millions. And Jasmine, she didn't raise her tone. She didn't need to. Her calm was the hammer. Her words, the strike. The difference, Mr. Trump, is that this isn't theater. This is truth. And the truth doesn't need a stage. It simply stands. The words landed like a verdict. No jury, no judge, just history etching the moment in fire. For a second, the world seemed to hold its breath again. And in that suspended silence, Trump looked smaller, diminished, stripped of the armor he had worn for decades. Jasmine lifted the final page. Her hand did not tremble. Her eyes blazed with the clarity of someone carrying not just evidence, but destiny. "This," she said, voice ringing through the hall, "is the proof that ends the lie." The chamber shook, not with chance, but with a wave of gasps, murmurs, and the rising thunder of realization. What had begun as his stage was now her battlefield, and she was winning. Trump slumped back into his chair. The folder slipped from his hands, papers spilling like broken promises onto the floor. His supporters, once loud as lions, sat in silence. No chants, no shields, no thunder left to give. And Jasmine, standing tall, eyes blazing, looked not like a politician, but like a warrior who had drawn blood. The killing strike had landed, and the nation knew it. Trump's mouth opened, but the words stumbled out in fragments, broken syllables without weight. This is, no you don't, they lied." His voice cracked, rising high and uneven, stripped of its practiced bravado. The fury that once thundered through the chamber now scattered into desperate, jagged notes. His face flushed crimson. Veins bulged at his temple. But behind the mask of rage, something else flickered. Fear. He slammed the desk again, harder this time, but it echoed hollow, a desperate man grasping at authority already slipping from his hands. "Lies! All lies! It's a setup! Everyone knows it!" he roared, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted to the cameras, to the witnesses, to the aides whispering nervously behind him. He wasn't shouting to command anymore. He was shouting to survive. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Standing tall, her voice rang out clear, slicing through the chaos like a verdict. "No one can deceive forever." The words struck with a finality that thundered louder than any gavel. The cameras caught everything. Every twitch in his face, every stumble in his tone, every ounce of power crumbling away. And then they turned, the lenses sweeping across the room, capturing the faces of the nation in miniature. Shock, anger, vindication. The full spectrum of an empire watching its emperor unclothed before the world. Some in the gallery gasped, mouths open in disbelief. Others leaned forward, eyes alight with something darker. Satisfaction, even delight. A few of his loyalists still tried to clap, to cheer, but their voices died quickly in the storm of truth. The chair's gavel cracked against the wood. "Order! Order in the chamber!" But order was gone. The room had already erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens nearly tearing paper. Cameras zoomed in close enough to catch the sweat dripping down Trump's collar. Even the guards at the perimeter looked tense, shifting uneasily, as though bracing for an explosion that might tear through the walls. Trump stumbled forward, gripping the microphone with both hands, his knuckles white. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice ragged now, cracking at the edges. "This is all politics. They're afraid of me, afraid of my power, afraid of the people who love me." But even as he screamed, the gallery roared back, not with chants for him, but with a tidal wave of noise that drowned him out. Booing, jeering, the sound of faith collapsing into fury. The once iron shield of his followers shattered, and in its place came the sound of a nation awakening. Trump's words dissolved into incoherence, half sentences, repeated phrases. His fury, once controlled and theatrical, crumbled into raw desperation. I made, Nobody's done what I've done. They can't. They can't do this. He swayed as he spoke, like a man leaning against the last rotten beams of a collapsing house. Jasmine did not move. She stood in the center of the chaos, steady as stone, her presence a pillar around which the storm circled. And when she spoke again, her voice rose above it all, clear and commanding. This is not about power. This is about truth, and truth does not bow to fear. The chamber trembled with the weight of her words. Reporters' pens stilled, cameras steadied, the roar softened into silence again, because everyone wanted to hear the final echo, and Jasmine gave it to them. You can scream, you can deny, you can rage, but you cannot erase what is written, what is seen, what is known. And tonight, everyone has seen it. The last word struck like a hammer. Trump's shoulders sagged. His hand slipped from the microphone. For the first time, his frame looked small, diminished, dwarfed by the enormity of the truth that pressed down on him. Papers still littered the floor at his feet, scattered fragments of a fallen empire. And in the gallery, faces turned, not with pity, but with fire. Some eyes gleamed with outrage, some with vindication, some with relief, as though a weight long carried was finally cast off. The chamber was no longer just a room. It was an arena where history had drawn its line. The mighty had fallen, and the nation, watching breathless through every screen, every headline, every shared clip that would spread like wildfire before dawn, knew they were witnessing the collapse of more than a man. They were watching the end of a reign, and Jasmine stood, unshaken, as the empire crumbled around him. For a breath, the chamber froze. After the storm, silence pressed heavy against the walls, as if the very air itself refused to move. No one dared to cough, whisper, or shuffle their papers. Every eye was locked on the two figures before them. One bowed, broken, the other upright, unyielding. Trump's head hung low, his face hidden in shadow. The shoulders that once bore the weight of roaring crowds slumped forward, stripped of pride. The image of strength he had clung to, shouting, pounding, snarling, dissolved into something far smaller. Not a warrior, not a leader. A man cornered by the truth, swallowed by it. The cameras caught it all. The tremor in his hand, the shallow breaths, the way he could not bring himself to look up. It was the portrait of collapse. And then, movement. Jasmine stepped forward, not timid, not tentative, but with the poise of someone who knew this was no accident, no fluke. She moved like a warrior walking through the smoke of battle, blade still gleaming, armor still unbroken. The chamber erupted, applause thundered, shaking the rafters. Chairs scraped back. Hands clapped until palms burned. The sound rolled through the room, wave after wave, not polite, not restrained, wild, unchained, the release of a nation that had held its breath for too long. Some shouted her name. Others simply roared, unable to put into words the relief coursing through them. And Jasmine, she did not smile. Not yet. Her face was solemn, fierce, lit by a fire that told the world this was not about triumph for herself, but for something far greater. She raised her chin, waiting until the noise swelled and steadied. And when she spoke, the words cut through the frenzy like a bell tolling across a battlefield. Today, she declared, her voice sharp and clear, truth has not only defeated one man, it has defeated the lie itself. The chamber erupted again, but this time the applause carried a different note. It wasn't just for her. It was for the idea that something greater had prevailed. Trump didn't move. He remained hunched, the shadow of defeat clinging to him, the false armor of power scattered in pieces at his feet. The spotlight no longer belonged to him. It had shifted irreversibly, and that spotlight turned now, unrelenting, to Jasmine. Light poured across her face, catching her eyes until they gleamed like steel and flame combined. Her figure seemed taller, stronger, outlined against the wreckage of what had been. In that glow, she looked less like a politician and more like a promise that justice could stand, a promise that lies could fall, a promise that the fight, however brutal, could be won. The chamber swelled with sound again. Applause, cheers, even tears. Some wiped their eyes in disbelief, overcome by the sense that they were not just witnessing politics, but history itself. And Jasmine, standing at the center of it all, finally allowed the faintest curve of a smile to form. Not arrogance, not gloating, but something brighter. Hope. The camera zoomed in for the closing shot, and the image was unforgettable. Trump bowed in shadow, the defeated relic of a reign built on bluster, and Jasmine, bathed in light, unbroken, a figure who carried not just her own victory, but the victory of truth itself. The final words hung in the air, etched into every heart that listened. Today, justice has spoken, and it will not be silenced. The applause rose again, fierce and relentless, echoing long after her voice faded. And in that final frame, the chamber alive, the people roaring, the fallen still, the risen radiant, the spotlight cut deep, illuminating her face. It was not the light of mere victory. It was the light of justice itself. And it burned, bright and eternal, like a promise no one could ever take away. In the end, this battle was never just about one man or one woman. It was about the eternal collision between arrogance and truth, between power that deceives and courage that refuses to bow. What unfolded in that chamber reminds us that lies may roar, but they are fragile. Justice may whisper, yet it endures. And when one voice dares to rise, not for self, but for what is right, it lights a fire others can follow. The lesson is simple. Stand firm, speak truth, and no darkness can outlast the light you carry. If this clash shook you, don't just move on. Carry it, question it, talk about it, like, comment, and share it with someone who knows the fight for truth is never finished. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where every lie meets its reckoning. Hit the bell, because the next confrontation won't be quiet. It'll be louder, sharper, and it may change how you see justice itself. This is a fictional dramatization, built from shadows of real corruption and the courage that rises against it. Any resemblance is symbolic, meant to challenge, to reflect, to awaken. Thank you for watching. Because justice doesn't arrive on its own. It rises when we demand it. We demand. This is Harrison Stories.